Thank you all for being here today. I'm Rick Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. We help people across the country understand what great American trains can be, what steps need to happen to make them happen, and then we help you persuade your legislators in your state capitals and the federal capital to take those steps. So if you love webinars like this, if you want great trains, please go to highspeedrail.us and go up to that Become a Member and hit that member button and make a donation. Even if you've already are a member and you love this presentation, please make another donation. We really appreciate it. So I have, for a long time, really cared about getting trains into Cleveland. Unfortunately, right around 1969 or 1970, I made a commitment to get electrified trains back into Cleveland Union Terminal. And you can see in the background there, I think it's one of them. Yes, electric trains going from Chicago to Cleveland. So I really care about this. I had the opportunity to visit Elyria a couple of weeks ago. Went and looked at where the Amtrak train station should be, and then compared that to where it is. That's very disappointing. The city of Elyria spent a lot of money to rebuild the old station so that it could function as a train station again, but various things have blocked the trains from stopping there. Plenty of room up there for two tracks so that you could have hourly service to Detroit and hourly service to Cleveland, which gives you half hourly service from Elyria to Chicago, which gives you half hourly service from Elyria to Cleveland. Shouldn't we have that? And that would make Elyria a much stronger city and a much more attractive place to live. So I'm really excited about the efforts of All Aboard Ohio. They have done a great job of ramping up their advocacy efforts in Columbus. And we've got Mitch Radovich here today to explain what they're doing, what their strategy is, and hopefully folks across the country can learn a little bit more about what people should be doing in their state capitals. So Mitch, thank you for being here, and go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Can you see my screen, Rick?
Yes.
Good to go? All right. Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining me today. And today we're going to go through a little bit of advocacy with All Aboard Ohio. So my name is Mitch Radovich. I am the board chair of All Aboard Ohio. I'm a proud Ohio State graduate, and I live in Cincinnati now. In my day job, I work in logistics, and then I moonlight as a transportation advocate, is what I like to say. So today we're going to give a little bit of background on the state of rail in Ohio right now. We'll go through some of the history, and we'll talk about where we currently are today. Then we'll share our vision for rail in Ohio moving forward. We'll talk about All Aboard Ohio as an organization, and then we'll talk about our advocacy strategy, both how we're attacking advocacy from the inside and advocacy from the outside. And then lastly, we'll share some of our lessons for how we think we could spread this advocacy philosophy across the country. Just as a tiny bit of background first, All Aboard Ohio was founded in 1973, and we've been advocating for passenger rail for over 50 years. And specifically, we exist to advocate for the establishment, improvement, and maintenance of a robust transportation system with passenger rail at the core. I'll go into a lot more detail about the organization in a bit, including our strategy, our design, our history. But first, I want to set the scene of where we are right now in Ohio. So, in the beginning, railroads came to Ohio back in the 1830s. Our first railroads were in Toledo. And by 1860, we had more than 3,000 miles of track across the state, which was actually more than any other state at that time. By 1880, we had 73 railroad companies operating in Ohio, and around 6,000 miles of track. And these lines shaped growth in countless towns across Ohio. An example would be in Crestline, Ohio, which actually began as a simple stop in the 1850s and grew into a city of nearly 5,000 people. Many other communities across Ohio, including Denison, Bellevue, Willard, and Kenton, all thrived thanks to railroads and the rail industries that popped up in those towns. So rail was at the heart of many of Ohio's early cities. And quite frankly, a lot of these cities were designed around rail, and you can still travel to these cities today and see how they popped up literally with rail at their core. So rail continued to expand in Ohio, and from the late 19th century through the 1920s, passenger rail reached its peak. So we had really luxurious trains like the 20th Century Limited and the Cleveland Limited, which offered fast and comfortable travel connecting the different Ohio cities and connecting Ohio to the nation. We had many landmark stations across our state, including Cincinnati Union Terminal, which opened in the 30s, and Cleveland's Terminal Tower, as well as Columbus Union Station. People preferred to take trains over long distances instead of cars, and Ohioans could board in nearly any mid-sized city across our state to get to places like Chicago, New York, New Orleans, or beyond. So rail really defined what transportation was at that point in time. However, we did not stay in the golden age forever. After World War II, the highways and cars rose, and affordable air travel came on the scene, which eroded the passenger rail stronghold on transportation. Additionally, federal investments specifically favored roads and aviation, and railroads bore the cost of that. Um, Throughout the 1950s and 60s, services were cut, routes were shortened, and stations fell into disrepair, and some were even demolished, like Columbus Union Station, as you can see on the screen. Many of the iconic trains that we had were discontinued, like the 20th Century Limited. And so Ohio, which was once a thriving rail capital, saw its network shrink extensively, and we started to enter into the Dark Ages. Oops. So this is starting in around the 1970s, we really had passenger rail essentially vanish in Ohio. Amtrak was created in 1971 to preserve the national system, but only a couple of those routes even touched the state. Many of our largest cities were left with nearly no connection to a nationwide rail network. For instance, in Cincinnati, where I live today, we have 3 trains a week that come at around 3 in the morning. You can see here at our train station, they have a sign on the door that says open daily from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., and that's not ironic. So for decades, Ohioans have had fewer and fewer passenger rail options than almost any other large state. Another example is in Columbus, which is one of the largest cities in the country without access to any type of rail. A once proud system is now in a long period of neglect. Currently, we have 3 Amtrak routes which go through the state of Ohio. We have the Cardinal, which runs 3 days a week, going from New York to Chicago via West Virginia and Kentucky. We note that there are stops on our southern border in Kentucky, which are accessible to many residents in southern Ohio, which we're very happy about. But we would love to get this to being 7 days a week at a very minimum. Additionally, we have the Lakeshore Limited, which runs daily on the northern tier, and we also have the Floridian, which also runs in the north. With that being said, we now think that we're approaching an era of renaissance for Ohio's rail. There's a lot of new programs which are in the works right now, including the Corridor ID program, including our long distance route studies. We think we can build up our existing Amtrak services, and we see significant movements across our state to have local connectivity within our cities, whether that's improving light rail or heavy rail in Cleveland, building out the streetcar in Cincinnati, or even bringing in bus rapid transit services which could connect to future Amtrak stops across our state. An example of this is the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of the Corridor ID program, which was set aside from the bipartisan infrastructure law back in the early 2020s, and it supports a strategy for developing state-supported routes through a multi-step approach which has different phases that the state can work through. Ohio has three proposed corridor ID routes. The first one is the 3C and D, which is probably the most famous in Ohio right now. This would connect Cincinnati to Dayton, Columbus, and Cleveland, with different intermediate stops in some of our mid-sized cities. Additionally, there's the Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit route, and there's the Midwest Connect route, which would connect Chicago, Fort Wayne, Lima, Columbus, and Pittsburgh. These three routes, we've got lots more information on our website at allaboardohio.org/routes, and would love to hear people's feedback on there. We actually have a place where you can write what these different routes would mean to you, and we use that, we collect that, and we actually use that in our advocacy work. So feel free to go check that out. Excellent. So that's a bit of our history. Now the history of All Aboard Ohio itself. We were founded in 1973 in Xenia, Ohio. And originally we're working to pick up those pieces from passenger rail's golden age in Ohio. The organization focused on advocacy, and we'll talk through some of the successes of the past, but also there was a significant focus on camaraderie, making sure that this was a place where fellow enthusiasts could come together, share their stories, talk about their trips, and really just build friendships, which is obviously extremely important. We were actually founded as the Ohio Association of Rail Passengers. And over the years, we have iterated and have become All Aboard Ohio. And as you can see, this is one of our older logos, which actually I'm repping that shirt right now. If you like it, go to that webpage. Over the years, some of the accomplishments that All Aboard Ohio has succeeded with is bringing forward the Lakeshore Limited in the 70s, advocating for the establishment of the Ohio Rail Development Commission, which is still in action today. Additionally, advocating for the resumption of Cardinal service in Cincinnati back in the 80s. For a period of time, it had been stopped. And then lastly, advocating for multimodality at the Toledo and Sandusky Amtrak stations, pushing to have Greyhound buses stop there to promote better connections to a wider network across the Midwest. So All Aboard Ohio today. We are Ohio to our core. We've got board members all across the state. We'll show a map of that here in a little bit. We have general members in all 33 of our Senate districts, and I believe right now it's 68 out of our 88 counties. What you see in this map, every single one of these small shapes is a zip code that has at least one All Aboard Ohio member. We've got more than 4,000 across the state now. We have chapters in Cincinnati, in Columbus, in Dayton, Toledo, Athens, and Cleveland, and we continue to grow. And we pride ourselves on having members and coalition partners in our urban areas, our suburban areas, and our rural areas all across the state. The mission statement of All Aboard Ohio today is that we advocate for the establishment, improvement, and maintenance of a robust transportation system, including expanded choices, enhanced mobility, and increased access to transportation. As for our values, we focus on improved transportation choices for all, knowing that some people don't have access to vehicles and others do, but may still want to have choices. We believe in the freedom to choose how you're going to get around. We believe in statewide collaboration, working with our friends at the State House, but also our friends in chambers of commerce, in other advocacy organizations, with labor, etc. We believe in community empowerment, and we'll talk on this a lot more as we walk through our external strategy. And lastly, we think that we need to be the catalyst for change, because even if everybody wants this, you need to have somebody take that first brave step forward and speak out to actually make the movement start to move. We hope to fill that spot in Ohio. As for our chief strategy, we aim for All Aboard Ohio to bring together stakeholders and influential coalitions to take advantage of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that presents itself via the Corridor ID program funding. We want to act as a liaison by assisting our coalition of stakeholders and legislators in achieving the vision by uniting our leadership to navigate that program. and how we do it. So we plan out our strategy before we do any action. And the beauty of that is we're thinking about exactly what our goals are that we want to achieve longer term. And so first and foremost, we had to develop our organization to be able to start to plan that strategy. Right now, the structure of our organization, we have around 4,000 members. We have 15 board members, 2 paid staff, around 15, maybe a little bit more of our what we call super volunteers. These are folks that are volunteering just as much, if not more, than other board members even. And then finally, we have 6 chapters and growing across the state. Our 2 staff members, we've got John Esterly, who's our executive director, and Beth Russell, who is our communications director, both based out of the Columbus area. They both are part-time employees for our organization, and we are so lucky to have both of them. Our board is located all across the state, and we've really put an emphasis on making sure we have a diversity of backgrounds, of age, of geography, and of thoughts. So we've got folks on all sides of the political spectrum. We've got folks from the cities, folks from rural areas, and everybody is coming together with this shared goal of connecting our state more effectively. We also have, like I said, an awesome group of volunteers. And this is really the secret powerhouse of All Aboard Ohio. We've got folks who will show up and be boots on the ground at events all across our state. We have people who lead our chapter meetings. We have an incredible communications team who puts in hundreds of hours of work to build up our social media and our website. And so all of these volunteers, in combination with our board and our staff, lead to the well-oiled machine which we have today. So with that well-oiled machine, we stepped out on our path of strategic planning. So the real goal here was for us to create the steps that we can have listed out to move forward and achieve our big goals. What's one of our big goals? Getting our major cities in Ohio connected with passenger rail. Another one of our big goals is changing how Ohioans think about transportation. So we partnered with a center called the One Source Center, which specifically focuses on helping nonprofits plan out their strategies. We defined the organizational values, the mission that I went through in the last couple of slides, and then we set out to create our SMART goals. So these are really measurable, short-term, attainable goals that we can then check in every month to evaluate our performance in achieving those goals. And then each year we can revisit them at our next board retreat, and we can restate what our strategy is for the upcoming year. So again, I just wanted to share with that in mind, the organizational values are the ones that I shared before. And our chief strategy is, again, focusing on moving forward the Corridor ID program by empowering our coalition within the government, but then also across our state externally in the public. Which leads us to how we designed our strategy. We have 2 spheres in which we look at advocacy in Ohio for AAO. The first is our internal strategy. So this is when we are actually in the State House, getting to know our legislators, talking to the folks who are handing out the money when it comes to the budget. This is our stakeholder coalition of local leaders across the state, as well as business leaders and community leaders who are kind of working behind closed doors, you could say. Again, a big focus of this is working through funding and working through the programs which were defined by the law to be handled by certain governmental organizations. So for instance, when it comes to the Corridor ID program, it has to have a sponsor, right? In Ohio, we have 2 different sponsors which we work with. For the 3C and D in the Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit routes, the sponsor is the Ohio Rail Development Commission, which we'll talk about in a minute. And for the Midwest Connect route, that sponsor is called MORPC, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization of Central Ohio. We work with both of them to make sure that their projects are moving forward. So that's inside, kind of behind closed doors. But then, just as important, if not more important, is what's happening outside those closed doors. And this is the external strategy. We know that the number one thing we can do to change the minds of politicians who are making the decisions is to put out a mandate from the public. And the way that we do that is by changing public opinion when it comes to transportation. We actually know that right now, the vast majority of people support passenger rail improvements, and we'll talk about that also in a future slide. But still, right now in Ohio, if you picked a random Ohioan on the street and you asked them to describe transportation in Ohio, the first thing they would say is car. Because of that, we are essentially leading a countercultural movement, trying to change the way people's initial thought about transportation works. We want them to think about trains. We want them to think about buses. We want them to think about pedestrian and cycling access when they think about transportation. They can also think about cars, but it should be one tool in a toolbox of many that can be used to get around our state. And we think that that's real freedom. Once we are able to change that public opinion and we're able to get a list of hundreds of thousands of Ohioans who support us, then we can pressure our politicians more effectively. Oftentimes, when I'm in the state house, I'll be told by certain politicians, oh, well, nobody in my district cares about this. And our goal is to be able to have advocates in every single representative's district so that when that excuse is made to us, we can say, are you sure? Because John here does care about passenger rail and he lives in your district. So get to know your constituents a little bit better, please. We also focus on media in our external strategy. And this is where our communications team has been vital to our successes. When we talk about media, though, it's both the electronic social website media of today, but then also traditional media, working with our radio stations, our newspaper outlets, and our TV stations, and making sure that we have great relationships with reporters across the state. Additionally, we have a big focus on our chapters and grassroots efforts because at the end of the day, it's those super volunteers that make All Aboard Ohio move forward. So having people who can show up to a festival and educate the public on the potential opportunities out there is critically important. And it also, again, brings back that camaraderie I was talking about earlier, making sure that there's something that brings people back to our organization, and that could be friendships. Lastly, stakeholders, because we know that while there are stakeholders who are behind closed doors, there's also extremely important stakeholders who are in the public eye as well. And so making sure that they're engaged, that they're loud, that they're sharing our content, and that we're collaborating with them is critically important. And quite honestly, an example of this is the High Speed Rail Alliance, which is a stakeholder in an improved passenger rail network across the United States. And here we are today building on our external strategy with all of you today. So we'll start by double clicking on that internal strategy. This should say internal. So the emphasis is on engaging and educating the decision makers inside the State House, inside our city halls, and inside our metropolitan planning organizations. We want to identify the power brokers, knowing who is dispensing the money, who's making the decision what ends up in the budget, who has access to federal grants, but we need their signature on the bottom to be able to even submit them. And who has the influence, even if they haven't been elected by the everyday people of Ohio. There are people who have influence behind the scenes, and we want to get to know them and encourage them to support our movement as well. We want also to build All Aboard Ohio's presence across our state to be the source for transportation information in Ohio. And we're really excited to share that we're starting to see this with many of our legislators, where we have them reaching out to us and saying, I saw this news article. Can you explain a little bit more about it? I want to educate myself. That's our goal. And so the fact that we're already seeing that today on both sides of the aisle is really exciting. So let's talk a little bit about the state of Ohio. In Ohio, we have one governor, we have 33 state senators, and we have 99 state representatives, and those are kind of spread out across our state. Within Ohio, we're funded through a biennial budget. So we have a new budget which comes out every 2 years that kind of sets the guide for how money will be spread out across the state for the upcoming 2 years. Our most recent budget just passed at the beginning of the summertime, and we were quite involved with lobbying for various things in that budget. Two of the main organizations which do work in our realm related to that budget would be ODOT, which mainly focuses on roads, but does do things like long-term planning and public transportation funding. That's the Ohio Department of Transportation. And then secondly is ORDC, or the Ohio Rail Development Commission. This is a group of commissioners which are appointed by the governor and also by a couple of them by the people in the State House. And they work to promote both freight and passenger rail in the state. It says in the mission both of those things. And while we are aware that right now the vast majority of ORDC's focus goes towards freight rail, we are trying to be a bit of a thorn in the side to make sure that that starts to change. We actually recently just had an ORDC meeting. They had 10 minutes scheduled for public comment, and I'm proud to say that our advocates showed up, and we took 45 minutes for public comment. So they might need to extend that in the next agenda. With all of this in mind, we also have lukewarm, I'll admit, but bipartisan support in our State House, where we have both Democrat and Republican leaders who are talking in favor of passenger rail. For instance, at our recent annual meeting that we had back in the summer, we had Representative Willis from Springfield, Ohio, who's a Republican and is the chair of the House Transportation Committee, speaking strongly in favor of the 3C&D and of the improved connections that passenger rail could bring. So we're really encouraged by that as we continue to move forward into this General Assembly. One of the ways that we engage with the folks in the State House is through legislative testimony. So for many state, but then also local votes in like city halls, for instance, there's lots of opportunities for public comment. And so us as representatives of our membership within the board and within our staff go and testify on behalf of passenger rail beneficiaries in our state. But then we also encourage our members to go and speak out. And we've had members come to things like Metropolitan Planning Organization meetings, city council meetings, and even hearings in the State House to speak on behalf of why passenger rail would benefit them. Another way that we get involved in the State House is through our kind of traditional government advocacy. One of our goals is to build relationships with all of our state and national legislators in Ohio. What does this mean? This means actually having them know who we are and having frequent enough access to them to fill them in on what's important to us right now. And again, to be there as their number one resource for all things transportation. We've had quite a bit of success with this so far. We had an extremely successful advocacy day back in the spring when we met with around 65 legislators in a single day, with different state senators and representatives. And then we actually had a big reception afterwards in the crypt of the State House where we got to talk to even more, including dozens of additional staffers. The key with this also, though, is keeping track of the individualized interests of each of these legislators. They all have different things that they're focusing on. Some are economic hawks, and so all they care about is improved development of our economy. So an argument like bringing in new companies who are attracted by connectivity could work very well with them. Others may care much more about the human rights aspect, the fact that we're providing transportation alternatives to folks who might not have access to a car, getting them access to healthcare, getting them access to schooling, getting them access to jobs. Additionally, there are folks who care a lot about sustainability or about disability rights. We acknowledge that our coalition is very, very broad, and so we make sure that we come to each of these individual meetings with a specific set of points that will apply to that legislator. The way that we keep track of this as well is through a really robust documentation system where all of our different advocates can work together to update what we know about our different government officials so that we can continue to build the relationship regardless of who the representative or regardless of who the All Aboard Ohio representative is that's talking to them. So here's a couple of different examples of folks that we've worked with. This is State Senator Reinecke, who's a very influential Republican senator in the State House. This is Congressman Greg Landsman, where I had the opportunity to meet with him in Washington, D.C. And then this is our advocacy team on our advocacy day. An important thing to note is these are not all aboard Ohio board members. These are also local leaders, folks from across our state, different metropolitan planning organizations, even a couple of mayors and city managers who all came to speak on behalf of passenger rail. Another really, really cool thing which we did this year was build our advocacy book. We'll talk more in our communication section about what our branding means to us. But we use this book as a fundamental resource to share what All Aboard Ohio stands for, but also all of the different possibilities for passenger rail in Ohio. And so we hand these out to legislators, to different stakeholders, and it just serves as a really good resource to get the conversation going. We also have it published online at allaboardohio.org/runsonrail, and I encourage you to check it out. One of my very favorite parts is that route feedback form I was talking about earlier. We actually have 4 submissions from folks online, which ended up in our advocacy booklet as examples of why passenger rail matters to Ohioans. So I recommend checking that out. We also work on the inside with local insiders. So this is people at the local level in our city halls, in our metropolitan planning organizations, and at our county level, and also with local businesses and chambers of commerce. We find that these folks are foundational for our All Aboard Ohio coalition, and they serve as many of the folks who actually have a sway on people in the state house. If there's one organization that a local legislator in the state house is going to listen to, it's likely their local chamber of commerce. So we've worked really hard to get a lot of them on board. Additionally, though, when we have these relationships, we can target local issues beyond passenger rail expansion. So again, some of the ones that I talked about include streetcar expansion, light rail expansion, and even heavy rail expansion up in Cleveland, as well as bus rapid transit, pedestrian, and cycling infrastructure improvements. These are some of those local partners that we've been able to bring on board for our coalition. So you'll see things like chambers, people in universities, labor, different cities, and then also some businesses as well. Lastly, maybe I should point out, we also have different advocacy organizations who serve as local partners for us. For instance, Transit Columbus in Columbus, Clevelanders for Public Transit up in Cleveland, and Civic Cincinnati, which is a Strong Towns affiliate down in Cincinnati. So that is our internal strategy. But additionally, we have to have a huge focus on what's going on in the public eye. We know that no matter what they want you to think, elected officials do report to the people. It's something we've struggled with right now in our society because everybody is so busy, but we really need to hold them accountable. And the only way that we can do that is when it's not just the 10 All Aboard Ohio board members that are shouting like crazy people at their legislators. We need every single Ohioan to be doing it. And I know that that's an easy thing to say, but we truly believe that if we're able to change that public opinion to be that countercultural movement, we can get everybody talking about it. And once everybody starts talking about it, it becomes a heck of a lot harder for us to be ignored. So All Aboard Ohio strives to empower those Ohioans to speak up for what they want. And we know what they want. Like I said, nearly 80% of Ohioans support passenger rail expansion, according to an ODOT survey. And so we're driving that countercultural social movement, redefining what transportation in Ohio means. How do we do that? Through our chapters. We have chapters across Ohio, and actually just this week the number has changed. So we have chapters in Cincinnati, Dayton, Cleveland, Columbus, and Toledo. We have a chapter in Athens, which has its first meeting coming up in the beginning of October. And we also just this week have our first university chapter at The Ohio State University, my alma mater. And we're super excited to see even more young people get involved. And we know that those are some folks who are very, very passionate about the potential for better connectivity. We believe that our chapters are the core to our grassroots activism and at the front line of engaging the public. There's only so many hours that us volunteer board members or our part-time staff can put in. And so the more people that we can get actively involved in our organization and get empowered to speak out and show up at things like tabling events or at rallies, the better we're going to be as an organization. So here's some examples of local issues also which the chapters can get involved in. Just recently, we were actively involved in issue 47 in Columbus, which brought funding for the Link Us initiative. This is going to lead to bus rapid transit routes in Columbus, as well as improvements to their existing bus network, which we think is vital for once the Amtrak trains shows up right by the convention center here, hopefully in the near future. We've also been actively involved in speaking out for streetcar expansion in Ohio. This is actually me getting to present at a streetcar forum back last year. And then we've also been active in advocating for improvements to the RTA system up in Cleveland. Now, the other piece of this is, again, redefining membership. Yes, we think that membership should involve having a say in how the board is working, but we think that membership should also be being active, having your boots on the ground, and going and spreading the word to people who aren't members right now. We also think that membership should be really, really fun. And so we try to bring field trips into our planning for our chapters. We try to bring in cool speakers, local leaders, and partner organizations to keep our meetings fresh and informative. And we try to make it be a place where you can build friendships. For the Cincinnati chapter, for instance, every single month after our meeting, we get together for a happy hour. Just on Wednesday, we had it, and there were around 15 people who stuck around after the meeting to just keep talking about what matters to them. It's really, really special, and we can see that in our chapters across the state. We've also put a huge focus on our public engagement strategy even beyond our membership. So how are we interacting with people who may not even know that the Corridor ID program is a potential possibility? The way that we do this is by being the leading source for insights and news on passenger rail in Ohio. So we've worked really hard to make it be that you can find us everywhere. You can find us on social media. I believe we're on 9 different social media platforms right now. So Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, you name it. YouTube, we're on it. We also host lots of events. We publish stories, and we try to drive conversation both on our website, on social media, but then also in the traditional media. A huge, huge part of this has been our volunteer communications team who work with our comms director to improve the way that we work. So this incredible team, they've really elevated the way that we present ourselves to the world. We'll talk through some of the different things that they've done over the past 2 years. But without them, let me tell you, this presentation would be much uglier. So you can thank these folks that you aren't looking at slides that were designed by me right now. That is not my skill set. But that really is the beauty of it, is as we find members and we find new volunteers, we find what their specific skills are, what are they bringing to the table, and we work with them to best utilize everybody's best talents. And that's really working smarter, not harder, when we have the right people to do the right tasks. So yeah, shout out to this team, Ryan, Ben, Nathan, and Sally. Sally recently kicked off our TikTok, which is already, I believe, at 4,000 followers in around a month. So really exciting stuff. One of the huge things that team did was rebranding for a digital world. So we got a new logo, we created a new merch store, a new website, a new blog, and new designs that attract the eye and allow us to gather members who are excited to be a part of our brand. We have folks who work at large branding organizations and are putting the same thoughts that they put into their day jobs into the branding for All Aboard Ohio, and we've really seen it shine. Our social media continues to take off, and Ohioans can find us no matter where they are. And so that's right. You can find us on Reddit, on YouTube, on Instagram, on X, Blue Sky, TikTok, everywhere. And our main tone is to be informative and educational, but also positive. We're trying to get Ohioans invested and hopeful for the future. And so we find that by having that hopeful tone the majority of the time, it makes it, when we have to have a negative tone, it makes it much more powerful for our followers. For instance, when we did this post about 36 hours to fix the Ohio state budget, we had over 1,000 people call their legislators as a result of this Instagram post. And I believe that combined, these two posts were seen by over 200,000 people. We get tons of engagement across our social medias, and the goal of them is to serve as a pipeline to membership. Our social medias are consistently pointing people towards our website, which I think is our next slide. And then on our website, we try to get people to sign up for our newsletter. Our newsletter points people to membership meetings. Our membership meetings point people towards volunteering. Volunteering leads to super volunteering, which leads to board membership. And that's our volunteer pipeline. Our website, though, we really are so proud of it, and it's continually an updating and evolving resource that's designed to delight users, no matter which device they're on. We want it to be the go-to source of truth, the place people go for news, for blog posts, for opinions, and also the place to go for resources. So we post any studies that we fund, any, like I said, news articles, but then also exciting updates from our organization. What are our chapters doing? What are the events that are coming up? We have a book club right now. You can sign up for all of that on our website, allaboardohio.org. The last thing I'll say that anybody can do to help, regardless of if you're in Ohio or not, is you can go to this on our main page. If you scroll down just a little bit, there's a box that says, tell us you support passenger rail. Please fill this in. Please share your zip code, even if it's not in Ohio. We're trying to see who is supporting Ohio passenger rail all across the world. And we literally are all across the world at this point. We have people from like France putting in zip codes that I don't recognize. So it's really, really a cool thing. Additionally, our website serves as a place to drive donations because, as we all know, advocacy is not free. We have 2 paid staff members, like I said. Funding also goes towards studies where we have legislators who are asking us questions, and we want to have an official source to hand them back. So we've funded 2 studies so far on the economic impact and on the estimated cost for passenger rail. We also put our money towards supporting our chapters, making sure we have the right resources when we go out in the public, and even working on things like educating our legislators. Another thing on our website that we have is all of our different traditional media resources. So we have a press kit, which is available whenever any of our press releases go out or whenever we're working with a reporter. And we also collect any time that we have a story, whether that's news, whether that's on the radio. This was a bucket list item for me, going and speaking on our local NPR station. But we're really proud to be out in the public on so many different dimensions. And so we really are building up a movement. We're driving conversations. We're seeing dozens, sometimes hundreds of new daily memberships. We're regularly in the news, and we're reaching hundreds of thousands of people on social media every month. And so I'll finish with advocacy across America, because really at the end of the day, we can't do it alone just in Ohio. We have advocacy partners across the Midwest, like the High Speed Rail Alliance, Rail Passengers Association, the Lakeshore Rail Alliance, and then many of our neighboring passenger rail associations in the Midwest and on the Lakeshore Corridor. And we believe that even if we get a perfect operation going, it's going to be really hard, for instance, to get excellent service from Columbus or Cincinnati into Chicago without great support from our friends in Indiana. So working with the Indiana Passenger Rail Alliance, working with NIPRA up in Fort Wayne to make sure that advocacy is going just as strongly in our neighboring states. And we intend to do just that. And one of the ways that we know we can get there is by finding passionate people in those states who are willing to also offer their time, putting strategy at the core, working smarter, not harder, and finding every single type of person with every single type of skill that can work to drive the mission forward. And so that's kind of what my challenge would be for you is no matter which state you're located in, find your equivalent of All Aboard Ohio, put your all into it, think positively, think about a better future that could come, and know that at the end of the day, the decision makers, even if they're not making the decisions that you want or agree with, they do report to you. And so it's your job to make them feel it if they don't make the right decision. Be sure to speak out. Use your democratically given rights. Show up to public comment. Send them an email. and make sure that they know what matters to you as a citizen of your state. In the scheme of All Aboard Ohio, though, how you can help us is to visit our website at allaboardohio.org, donate to us, allaboardohio.org/donate, sign up for that supporters list that I was talking about, join our Slack, which is our Center for Communication and Community when we're not in our chapter meetings. Follow us on any of those social media platforms, and also, again, get involved in your state with one of our partners. So with that, I'll say thank you very much. And Rick, I'm ready for some Q&A.
Excellent. And if you can stop sharing, there we go. And I need to make myself go away. Never mind. Okay, so first question out of the gate was you guys very frustrated, I know, about an attempt to get Ohio to join the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you all thought that was important, what you did, and what you're going to do next?
Yeah. So we believe that being in the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission is important because that's one of the groups that's setting the tone for the future of passenger rail in the Midwest. It's making decisions that Congress has actually given it over Ohio, right? They have jurisdiction over the Midwest. And so if we don't have Ohioans at the table speaking up, decisions are going to be made for Ohio, which Ohioans might not want. It might mean things like a focus on a different part of the Midwest or keeping Ohio out of the potential for future routes. Another example of that, I was able to attend the MIPRIC meeting last year, and they talk a lot about the shared fleet that different Midwestern states can share. And so if we don't have a seat at the table in conversations like that, it actually could lead to Ohio having to spend more money on an implementation for passenger rail, which is inefficient and just doesn't make sense. We were frustrated that at the end we did not get that included in the budget this year. We actually did successfully advocate for it to be in the House version of the budget, but we have a couple of senators, which we have identified now, that we need to change the minds of. And we now have what the excuses that they were saying are. I know that I can disprove all those excuses, but the question is, how do we get in front of those excuses so that it's politically impossible to say no? And
Well, so you've used the word excuse, right?
yes,
Um, let's put a friendlier word on that I can't think of at the moment. What's the objection to joining the commission?
right. So one objection, and think about this for a second, is paying $25,000 for the annual membership. $25,000. Do you know? Do you want to take a guess at how much our annual highway budget is in Ohio, Rick?
No,
You don't want to take a guess because
I
it's
know guess.
triggering, right? It's like $7 billion.
That's all.
$25,000 in my testimony to the State House, I said that's less than the price of a slightly used Honda Accord. That's that is what I call a bad excuse. I will use that negative term. That is a bad excuse. The other one, they're saying that they don't want to give authority over to the to MIPRIC, and our response to that is MIPRIC has the authority whether you're there or not. So you not being a member is actually you giving them more authority.
Well, if I may have a discussion about that, I think part of the challenge with the commission is they don't really have any authority. Uh,
Legally, they
so,
do though.
so they have everything they do has to be approved by the states. If they do something in a specific state, it has to be approved by that specific state, which I think is part of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I apologize for cutting you off on that.
Oh no, you're good. I guess the last piece of the question though was
Right.
what's our next step, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
absolutely.
our goal is to have at the first meeting of the House Transportation Committee, we want to have that. The other excuse was there's too many lines in of addition in this budget for MIPRIC. They wanted it to be a standalone bill, and so our response is, all right, we already have the standalone bill written. Let's vote on it. And so that's what our goal is to do during the first transportation meetings of the year for this General Assembly.
Excellent. So again, for for 10 or so years, I was an Ohio resident. Have spent a little bit of time there over the last couple of months. Lots of opportunity in my view. But what are some other reasons why people would kind of say, yeah, we shouldn't invest in this, do you think?
So I'll I think that the number one reason why people say we shouldn't invest in this is because they don't understand the impact that it could have. They just see a price tag and they see what their current daily life is, which is using a car, and it seems to be working fine. We like to point out what some of the residual impacts of that are. For instance, we aren't used to talking to each other nowadays because we spend our commutes locked in a box by ourselves instead of on a train or on a bus sitting next to our neighbor. And there's a big impact psychologically that we're starting to see trickle down in our society from that. Um, People, the main response is cost. They're saying this is going to be a significant cost to build, and people say that nobody will ride it, which we all know is not true. It might mean that they would not write it in its current state, but we know if you look at many of the states which are succeeding with the development of passenger rail, states like North Carolina, states like Virginia, even up in the Midwest, up in the Borealis corridor, where we're exceeding ridership projections by tens of thousands, we know that people will ride it if we build it.
Absolutely. There is a huge demand that is not being met, and
Yep.
hopefully we can channel that frustration into real change. Um, okay, I'm sorry. Let's go back. So you've got a lot of volunteer activities. How are those volunteer activities managed? Is there a volunteer manager who's also a volunteer?
Yep.
Okay,
Um, with myself, my executive committee, my board, we spend a ton of time planning out processes. I mean, we really are, yeah, trying to be as robust of an organization as we can be. So when it comes to volunteer management, we have an engagement committee, which basically what we do there is we bring together our chapter leaders from across the state. So we've got 7 different well, we've really got like 14 different chapter leaders because a lot of the chapters have co-leaders. And we say, okay, in your area, what's the outlook of your membership? Who do you think are promising volunteers who are going to get a lot of stuff done? What are some of the goals for your area? And most importantly, what can the central board do to equip you to get those things done, right? One of the responses that we got recently is we want to be in the public more. We want to set up more tables at different events. But to do that, we need more posters. We need trifold boards. We need things that we can use to set up to look like a legitimate organization. And so what are we doing right now? We're working on fundraising to get the money together to build out those we're calling them chapter kits, so that we can have a chapter kit for each chapter. And then our chapter leads will find the volunteers, which is what they can do best, and build out that network that way.
excellent. And then questions come up a couple of times. How do you guys define a member?
Good question. Yes, and I meant to cover it on my redefining membership slide. So we define members in 2 different ways. We have both paid members and general members. So a paid member is more like the traditional membership, which is historically what All Aboard Ohio's general member was. So it used to be, I think it was if you pay $35 a year, you can vote on the board, things like that. Um, as we moved forward now, we have a pay what you can model, which allows anybody to be a member, but they don't get certain privileges which come with being a fully paid member. So now we have around 300 or 400 who are paid members that pay at least $50 a month. And then we have the 4,000 number is anybody who has at a minimum said that they want to be counted as a member when it comes to the statistics with legislators. The reason this is important is there's 2 things that legislators care about, right? They care about money and they care about votes. Unfortunately, for me at least, I do not have Jeff Bezos money. What I can do is empower people to sign up for the list to provide votes. And so that's why we took that approach of general membership.
So, are you using a system like Every Action or I can't remember the other brands, so that folks can actually send emails to Columbus?
We have not gone with that yet. We've actually seen, because it costs money, honestly. Um, we have actually seen a lot of success, though. We have just a Google Drive advocacy booklet, which we're consistently updating. So we're constantly pushing people to allaboardohio.org/advocacy. And no matter when you go on there, you'll see what the most recent topics that we want people to be pushing for are. And within there is direct links to their phone numbers, to their emails, and draft emails. Um, we have received feedback that it would be even easier if you could click one button. But what we've also received is feedback from the legislators who say that slightly individualized messages mean a lot more to them. So we encourage that.
Excellent. And then, in terms of advocacy, it seems like at this stage in Ohio, the most important thing to do is start getting design and engineering work going. Um, and so the corridor ID process is a federal process which has turned out to be fairly cumbersome and slow. But it still is going to require substantial state money to keep that process moving.
Correct.
And we've been saying much more loudly in Illinois, we need to keep moving, whether or not the corridor ID process is there. But what's happening with getting Columbus to actually appropriate money for designing routes?
Yeah, so we have so like you said, corridor ID program has kind of 3 steps and then construction. So really 4 steps, right? Um, for both the 3C and D in Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit, both of those routes, step 1 has been submitted to the FRA, so we await approval from the FRA. We were a little concerned about that because we hadn't seen any other states get approved. But just last month, actually, All Aboard Ohio broke the news because we had been watching it, that Massachusetts got their corridor ID phase 2 approved. So now we're seeing movement on that, and we're excited to keep pushing forward on that front. When it comes to step 2 funding, there's a 10% local match, so that would have to come from the State House, like you said. And we have from the Ohio Rail Development Commissioner, like the executive director of that commission, that it will come from their budget for phase 2. I know that MORPC, which is again the Columbus MPO, is actively working to get their phase 2 funding as well. When it comes to phase 3 and construction, those are much bigger line items. They will probably have to be their own line items in the budget. And we are already starting the groundwork to be ready for that fight come the 2027 budget.
So, to quote a anonymous source of fairly high up in the Illinois Department of Transportation, this is kind of not worth the effort if we're not talking about at least 10 trains a day, which is a train every 2 hours. Um, and unfortunately, most of the states in the Midwest have really low goals Michigan, despite owning most of the right of way, is just talking about 6 trains a day. I'm not sure what Ohio ORDC is talking about for Detroit. It's like 2 or 3, right?
Yeah.
It seems like if we're going to go through a 10-year process, and the process of going through environmental and design work and adding track and rebuilding stations because the stations just don't work, buying equipment, it seems like the goal, if it's a 10-year plan, should be something that's going to create true mode shift. That's my opinion.
Right.
So
Or go
how
ahead.
do you influence this? If you adopt my position, I don't know if you do, how are we going to influence this process so that they're talking about a train every hour to Detroit?
Right. And for background, everybody, this is something Rick and I have talked about before. So and my response is frequently we have if we look at an example like North Carolina, I will answer your question as well though. If we look at an example like North Carolina, where they started with 3 trains a day and now they're up to 5 and they're selling out those trains, we know that it is possible to get the foot in the door. But you're absolutely right that you need frequency to create that mode shift. The other thing you need to create the mode shift is changing the public opinion, right? And so we know we can focus on that even without that frequency, making it so that even if it's just a mode shift for how people get to Ohio State Buckeye games from Cincinnati, that's a first way to do it, but that's not going to get people getting rid of their cars or lead to us becoming Germany, right? Um, the issue is, again, because right now, uh, I would say, I mean, it's so different, even Ohio versus Chicago. The vast majority of Ohioans have never been on a train, like never. Not even Metra, not even CTA. Like have never been on a train. Many of them have never been in a vehicle that is not a car. And so um, just getting that in view is so extremely critical. And it's also the reason why we're planning field trips for folks to go to Michigan and to North Carolina and see what a train looks like. To see, oh wow, this seat in economy is more comfortable than a first class seat on any of those beautiful airlines that go to O'Hare, right? Like that concept needs to get installed in people's minds, and the only way we do that is even with one train a day. Right
Uh,
now, right now, the only trains that come through Ohio come in the dark.
oh
So
yeah,
when the
I've
Cardinal
ridden those trains.
when the Cardinal is running 6 hours late, people line up to see the train drive into Cincinnati during the daytime because it's such a treat.
I've been on a train through Cleveland in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Again, we got stuck in Washington. I will tell you, this was a while ago, probably 6 years ago. They parked one of these antique Amfleet cars out someplace and let people tour it. And I'm thinking, oh my, but everybody loved, oh, how comfortable this is. And like,
Yeah.
well, you just don't know.
If you're used to a ultra low cost airline to get you to you know Philadelphia, this is a little bit nicer.
It's much nicer than that. That is the truth. The interesting thing about we could go on for a long time. I'm really glad that you guys are doing this effort. Um, you know, I'm glad you overviewed what your strategy is for grassroots organizing. That's absolutely what needs to happen in um, 49 states if we're going to have great intercity passenger trains. Um, so I only left out Hawaii. Um, and I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. Looking forward to working much more closely together. And unfortunately for me, I will be driving to Ohio much more frequently. So hopefully we can run into each other the next time I'm there.
Absolutely.
Um, and I think we're at the top of the hour. You said your website a couple of times. Say it again.
It's allaboardohio.org.
Excellent. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you all in the audience for being part of the Alliance. We are looking forward to really making some big change in our states and in DC. And we've got tremendous change happening all around every level of government. And when change is happening is when you need to push as hard as you can for the change you want. So now's the time to be engaged. Really glad that you are. Thank you all again for coming and thank you, Mitch, for talking today.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everybody. And
Excellent.
keep advocating. We'll get
Yes,
there.
absolutely. Bye.
Ciao.